former Falcons general manager, longtime front office executive in this league, Thomas Dimitroff, back here on the show. How you been, Thomas?
Rich, I am well. I will tell you one thing. I don't think Gutekunst and Joe Douglas are having as much fun as you guys are right now.
Well, I mean, how does one play this if you're Joe Douglas? You don't call? I mean, obviously you don't know who's called who last, right? But
No, you don't. But you do sit there and you're. I've been in situations where you have regular conversations and you trust your conversations and they're very communicative. And I've been on the other side where you are knocking your head against the wall, waiting for a call, trying to get some semblance of completion to a deal like this. This is a really, really interesting one, of course, as we all know.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Swingers, Thomas, where, the Jon Favreau character is calling Nikki, 15 times the girl he just met at the bar, and he blows the whole deal straight up in just one night. That's what it seems like. If Joe Douglas is calling, hey, Brian, just checking on you, see how you're doing. And I don't know. The thing that kind of surprises me is that the compensation appears to have not been worked out prior to the plane trip that the Jets took to take Rodgers out to dinner out here on the West Coast. Is that surprising to you, Thomas, from afar?
No, I don't think it's surprising. I think we often have conversations like, look, you're given permission to do so, or you're getting, given the check off by the clubs to keep you in a good spot. And then you go out and you realize there's no deal here and there's a lot riding on it. When you start talking about a first round pick, that's, obviously that's big. In my mind, I'm sitting there thinking about the two of these guys discussing this and, the discussion out there, who has more leverage, right? Is it Joe Douglas with the Jets or is it Brian Gutekunst? I really do believe right now that the Jets have a little bit more leverage because I don't know what they're going to do there in Green Bay. There's a lot of angst there, as you can imagine, right? They want it done. You flip it over to the Jets side, however, they need their guy in there right now. I get anxious as a general manager when I don't have my team together, working together in the spring, spending time together and growing together. That is a big deal. I still think the Jets have the leverage.
Especially since, in my mind, Thomas, Rodgers has already announced his intention of wanting to play somewhere else. And, and I'd understand if a front office wants to make sure a fan base that it would be, writ large, livid, upset over turning a page away from yet another generationally brilliant quarterback that they've had now back-to-back in Green Bay. You want to, quote-unquote, save face. But this is just something that everybody knows. Green Bay doesn't want him back. He now officially doesn't want to go back there. Green Bay wants to move forward with Jordan Love, fully aware that he's not Aaron Rodgers and he might not become one. And the Jets need Aaron Rodgers because we all know Zach Wilson is not Aaron Rodgers, and we don't know if he'll ever become one. Right? I mean, it's so obvious. So then what is the dance about? Like, what insight can you give me about having been in dances before, Thomas?
Well, yeah, dances as they are can be fun, and they can also be, again, they can kind of be sweaty and smelly if you're thinking about them, right? And when I start thinking about this dance that they're playing right now, they're both in a really tough spot, meaning both general managers. I can answer to that. I've been on the hot seat a hell of a lot, and it is not fun. And both of these guys have an element of heat on their seat, and I think they're very good at what they do. They're both very even keel, so they're not pushy guys out there. Some of the other guys out there that are really pushy with their trading and their moves. These guys are hanging in there. They know that they both have, again, they both feel they probably have an element of leverage here. I guess what I'm saying in the end here, without rambling about it, is
go ahead.
I really do believe that he ends up going to the Jets. They end up looking at, potentially, the whole future idea, the futures and what they're going to do contingent on the amount of time that Aaron stays with the team and the production that he puts forth, whether that's Super Bowl related. I think you get creative like that, and you pass up this year's first, so you don't worry about this year's first round. Maybe you think about next year's. Remember, there's always a discount when you're talking about future, right? If you're talking about a future first round, that might settle in well along with, potentially a second and a third round this year. That is where I think it's going to go, and I think they're going to ultimately have to settle on something very creative, again, contingency-wise.
And then when do you think midnight strikes? When do you think both sides will realize, okay, in this midnight deal-making league, it's nearing 12:01? When do you think 12:01 might be? Draft, after the draft, training camp? What do you got for me on that front? Your best guess.
I don't know. I would love to go into the draft with this all completed. So, that just is such a solid feeling for a general manager, right? You have it mapped out. You have a good idea of where you are. You know where you need to be focusing. That's on both sides of the ledger in my mind. So, look, I think it has to be before the draft personally.
Thomas Dimitroff, two-time NFL Executive of the Year, Thomas Dimitroff here on the Rich Eisen Show. Walk me through what you think Carolina's going through right now. They saw CJ Stroud yesterday, took him out to dinner 2 nights ago. After seeing CJ Stroud yesterday, they flew to Alabama to take Bryce Young out to dinner. He's having his pro day today. What do you think Scott Fitterer and that front office and the executive team there and Coach Frank Reich is going through right now and thinking about?
Yeah, I think Scott Fitterer, another even-keel guy, right? I think he is really honed in with his new head coach, of course. And most important, he's honed in on what his owner wants. David Tepper needs to pull a quarterback, as the entire organization does. A lot of pressure there on Scott, and Scott is a guy that can handle pressure for sure, but they're looking at making sure that they hit on a quarterback. You watch CJ Stroud in that workout. I'm sure you got an opportunity to watch it. Cool, smooth, poised. Everything about him seems like that would be a really good place to be for Carolina, given Frank Reich's personality, given that Frank Reich, we've been probably reading a lot about the fact that he has an affection towards a little bit bigger quarterbacks. I'm not saying Bryce Young is too small for him at all, but I am saying the way that CJ Stroud looks, at least at this point, is he just comes to the table with all you need to come to the table with as a first round. And, Bryce, of course, has unbelievable ability. He has unbelievable ability to move and to adjust. And I think you have a guy like Scott Fitterer and Frank Reich sitting down, just the two of them, everyone out of the room, right? Because they're traveling with, 10, 12 people, whatever it is.
Yeah, they're traveling heavy.
Just those two in the room. And they know that, Scott knows that this is huge for him. Frank Reich is at the beginning of his tenure, right? So they're going to be working together, discussing together. They're going to discuss what the game plan would be schematically as well, Rich, which is really important. There's a difference in approach when you have Bryce Young coming into the game as your number one quarterback. So there's a lot involved here. In the end, it comes down to the head coach and the GM talking about what they want for the betterment of the organization, even though their owner is hovering, rightly so.
Yeah, and I'm sure he will have an opinion as well, Thomas. But do you think they made this deal with one guy in mind and they're now just in a due diligence tour? Or how does that work?
Oh, they have to have had. I really do believe that. I think they have to. You can't go and do something that monumental and not know who it is. Now, the discussion of, an athlete like Anthony Richardson coming into the picture, I just don't think it plays into there at all, just to kind of set the line on that. I can't imagine that it's not focused on one of these two guys. And they know very strongly. And I would not be surprised if the owner has a real affection towards a guy who has won a lot at Alabama.
So who do you think, knowing the situation best you can, who do you think that guy that they traded up to get and they're doing due diligence on everyone else on, who do you think the guy is? Is it Stroud? You think it is?
I'm feeling it's Stroud. I'm feeling it's Stroud, but in the back of my mind, it keeps knocking on my door that, this is a winner, and they've been looking for winners. And remember this, David Tepper doesn't mind. He's brought in all types of quarterbacks over the last, 5 years?
Right.
So I don't think he's completely personally dissuaded by the size himself.
In Bryce Young. So you think, I love it, man. It's an either or situation. Thomas Dimitroff here on the Rich Eisen Show. In the few minutes I have left, I want to hit the Lamar Jackson scenarios with you. And what? Let me just throw this one out there. Eric DeCosta, everybody thinks that he's sitting back ready to just match whatever the heck Lamar Jackson gets. Do you think that's the case?
I do not. I do not think it's the case. I think he looks at it all. I think he's in a really good spot, to be honest with you. And I think it's going to settle where he's going to be settling for that. What was it? 32-4?
Right.
What's the number? I just think it's going to end up that way. And I don't think he's going to have to worry about stepping up the match.
Why?
I just don't see. I guess the way it is right now, I just don't feel like there are teams out there that are chomping at the bit. There's a lot on the plate. We've talked about this before on and off record. I mean, it's this. I mean, have you guys had a lot of discussions, by the way, on the collusion stuff? I don't know if we want to go down that lane.
No. Go for it. I mean, I hear that all the time. That word being thrown around, and I don't know if all the owners have gotten in a room, or on a Zoom, an encrypted Zoom, and said there is not going to be another soul on this screen giving a contract out similar to what Deshaun Watson just got from the Browns. But I just think industry-wide, nobody liked that contract. Nobody liked the contract. Nobody liked the guy who got the contract because of the circumstances surrounding Watson. And I think most front offices despise that contract with 1,000 furies. And then Kyler Murray gets 180-something million guaranteed. Not all of it is a guaranteed contract. Russell Wilson gets a new contract. He doesn't get everything guaranteed. So those are two in the case right there that are not the same case as Cleveland. And you want to call that collusion? I don't know. I mean, the contract was so widely despised by everyone that I don't know if anybody really wants to go in that direction. Is that simple?
Yeah, I don't.
Or what?
I know, going back and forth on whether it's collusion or not. What we do know categorically is no team wants to be agitated by their next deal, right? And to think about a deal that has the entire deal being guaranteed is an agitation, whether it's, behind the scenes or not. I mean, that's a really complicated place to be. I'll speak from a general manager's perspective, and from a team perspective, that's a lot guaranteed. You can bring up the Atlanta Falcons. Why are the Atlanta Falcons not interested?
Yeah,
I think there are many, many layers to that, Rich. I think, not only is it the idea that they are just getting through what they considered cap hell. Some guy that used to be there was responsible for that, ostensibly. Well, there's a long story to that. We'll talk about that another time.
Right.
But the fact is, they're getting out of that. They need their draft picks to be doling out, 2 first-round draft picks and all of this money. I just feel truly that this organization in Atlanta, where I'm standing right now, want to move beyond that. They want to start building. Now they have a quarterback situation, which is why we're talking about this, that is very complicated for them right now. Tyler Heineke's not coming out there into Atlanta and just being the savior. We know that. Now they're sitting at a spot in the draft that they could potentially pull another one. They had one from last year. I think there's a lot rolling that way. I also believe back to you bring a guy like Lamar in. You're talking about a different system. I alluded to it earlier, right? Talking about coaching in a different way. That's another complication. I just think in the end they want a fresh start, and that's my opinion why I feel they're backing away from this in Atlanta.
But you also know the man that used to sign your checks is a very, dynamic individual,
Yes, he is.
and makes his thoughts known. I honestly thought Arthur Blank might sit there and go, this is what a major move this would be for me, for us, for this city, for the franchise. Brady's gone. Carolina's going to, draft a rookie. New Orleans just starting with a new quarterback. First overall pick this year and next. And I know it's a large chunk of dollars, but hey, Arthur Smith, you did wonders with Ryan Tannehill. How does Lamar Jackson sound to you? Like, you don't think Arthur Blank is sitting there having those thoughts for a moment or two?
There is no question, Rich. You're exactly right. I've been in so many of those conversations. I mean, up and down the line as far as Thomas, what about this? Smitty back in the day, Dan Quinn back in the day. Like we had all of these conversations. He was the guy as a really adept businessman who was always throwing out those thoughts, and you had to think about them, and you couldn't just sit there and go to yourself or to the group, yes or no. I mean, you had to have a strong reason. The one thing I do know, as I've heard more and more, I mean, Arthur Smith is a good football coach. Arthur Smith has done good work with the run game there, which we struggled to do, quite honestly. I like what he's doing that way. Arthur Smith is a very strong, opinionated guy, and he's got a strong presence with Arthur. So I think they sat down and had some great conversations. But in the end, I mean, I'm giving this to Arthur Smith, and I'm giving it to Arthur Blank. He's listening to Arthur, and I think ultimately it is Arthur Smith's call, not Terry Fontenot's, and I say that respectfully. I think he's making the call, and I think they're looking other places.
Thomas, thanks for the time, man. I look for my calls between now and, by the way, 5 weeks from tonight, first round of the draft.
I can't wait. You guys are great, and look, brings back a lot of memories. Thanks for having me on.
Always. We'll chat very soon. Look for more of my calls and texts. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. That's Thomas Dimitroff, former executive in the NFL, two-time NFL General Manager of the Year, right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.